Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 6th episode of Leadership Talks. It is heartening to receive your motivating and encouraging comments about this talk series. I'm Rupam Shah, your host for the show, and today I have with me someone who is a knowledge giant, an internationally renowned expert specializing in pedagogy and the use of technology tools to enhance it. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Professor M M Pant, who has been working non-stop for past 50 years towards advancement of education in India and abroad. But before we enter into a conversation with him, let's have a look at his professional journey. Professor M M Pant has served as a Pro-Vice Chancellor, IGNOU. With a doctorate in physics and an LLB degree, he has served as a legal practitioner in Allahabad High Court. He was a faculty member at IIT Kanpur, MLNR Engineering College, and also a visiting faculty at the University of Western Ontario, Canada. He is a visiting scientist to major research centers in England, Germany, and Sweden. He is associated in advisory roles with various national bodies like NCTE, NCERT, NIOS, Center for Educational Communications, and is also the Chairman Board of Studies, All India Management Association. He pioneered the virtual campus initiative of IGNOU. He has around 100 research papers published. He scripted an educational film titled Atoms, produced by IIT Kanpur, which won the International Cup of Rome Award and later the National Award in the year 1974. He has delivered talks and seminars at a number of international conferences in around 20 different countries of the world. Professor Pant's current work and interest revolves around the development, delivery, and promotion of educational models, leveraging the current and emerging technologies to develop future-ready lifelong learners. Welcome, sir, to this talk series, and it's an absolute honor to be talking to you today. And I hope that all our viewers are going to be taking back a lot of good points which they can take back to their own professional life and use it meaningfully. So my first question to you is that you've done your PhD in physics and then you did law. So what was that which inspired you to be doing law after doing a PhD in physics?
See, I am a kind of a lifelong learner. I like to learn new things. I could not do medicine because there is no way I could have gone and become a doctor after doing this, because you have to go through the entrance exam and 5 years, etc. Law was more flexible. But let's keep that apart. Law was easy to do because it was less restrictive. Medicine is much more difficult to do. You can't just go and sit in a medical college and start attending lectures and so on and so forth. But I will share with you the benefits of doing this and why this is important. The practical part you can forget, but the important part which most people miss, and I think you will appreciate, we are moving toward an information society. Yeah. So whether I talk physics or chemistry or biology or law, we are talking about information processing. All these are what Peter Drucker would have called knowledge workers. And therefore, when you are doing different kinds of information processing, you learn different ways of higher cognitive activities. Okay. And people who don't do that miss one part of it. And I will share with you concrete stories. So I was a member of the board of management of IIT Delhi for 6 years. Twice during those board meetings, I pointed out the problem in the decision which had already been approved and filed by the chairman board of governors, who was no less than Professor M.G.K. Menon. But he was gracious enough that when this was pointed out, he rolled back his decision and did another thing. So the problem is that a lot of people in administration are not aware of the legal aspects of things, and therefore they take things for which then people have to go to court every other day. And the courts are burdened with a lot of litigation. It would not happen if people were more aware. Right. Like in health, they say prevention is better than cure.
Right.
And this is what we are trying to do for the coronavirus. We say we don't know the coronavirus.
Yes.
Similarly, legal awareness among large number of people is better than litigation and huge amount of piling up.
Correct.
This is a very important. But I take it to a bigger philosophical level. Just like when we speak in Hindi, occasional putting of Sanskrit is important. So when you talk of law, a lot of Latin phrases are put in. Ubi jus ibi remedium, res ipsa loquitur, all kinds of things. One of the very famous maxims in law is ignorantia juris, non excusat. Now you have heard of this in simple English saying ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Yeah.
And you can see this today also, that if you don't know that there is a lockout, etc., you can't say, I didn't know.
Right.
Now look at the implication. When you are saying ignorance of the law is no excuse, it is your responsibility to find out the latest law.
Correct.
And this is where my thing about learning comes up. I say ignorance itself is no excuse.
Yes.
And therefore you have to constantly learn, unlearn and relearn. So today, there is no point in your saying constitutional amendment gave me right to education. If I'm between 6 to 14, I must be in school. That is what that 2008 Act says. But you have to unlearn and relearn that today schools are closed because of the other act of epidemic, etc. This is true of life.
Absolutely.
When we talked of this Latin phrase, that was man-made laws. But natural laws are equally true.
Yes.
So if you say, I do not follow the law of coronavirus infection or contagiousness, it doesn't help because nature will do its own thing.
Absolutely.
So it is even more important than man-made laws to understand nature's law and to abide by nature's law.
Absolutely.
Which is where physics
connection.
and biology come in.
Lovely.
The whole thing, no, this is actually, in fact, if you were interested in spirituality and so on, if you look at Buddhism, what did Lord Buddha say? Lord Buddha said, all our pain is because of ignorance.
Yeah.
I jokingly used to say, because you don't know Pythagoras' theorem, therefore you are in pain. But this is the fact. So I think one of the very important things to understand about education is it is retrieving you from ignorance.
Yeah.
And we think of it as something which we are doing as a favor. I'm agreeing to study, I'm doing the homework. No. You are being salvaged from the ill consequences of ignorance.
Right.
And therefore, the more you are aware of, you cannot say, I know all the laws of physics, but I don't know the laws of chemistry, and I will eat some poison and then have that effect. Or I don't know the laws of biology, and I will be infected by a virus or whatever. So the whole point is that education is about removal of ignorance.
Right.
Whether you take it as a religious format, as part of Buddhism, or you take it as a philosophical thing, or you take it as a practical thing.
Absolutely.
You violate the laws of nature and you take potassium cyanide, the consequence will happen.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how in good faith you did it or in Lord's name you did it. Places now. See, all this thing about religious places over because the law of biology is working stronger than the religious belief.
Correct, sir.
This is what my starting point is, and this is why law is very interesting, because law has a principle of adversity. In fact, it's a very important thing. One of the first principles of natural justice is hear the other side. So if all other laws, it's called audi alteram partem. Now the point here is that very often we take one view and we don't even look at the other view.
Yeah.
Even in science, we have a hypothesis and we verify this. Right? But law is the one where you say, no, I want somebody to represent the other side. Even if a client cannot afford a lawyer, and it is called informa pauperis, the court appoints a lawyer for that, because they say without knowing or hearing both sides of a story, we cannot conclude. So to me, both are methods of getting at the truth. One is a scientific method, one is the adversarial method, and one is maybe the spiritual method where you directly get to know from God what the truth is.
Right. So it's such a beautiful connection that you made, and it's so important that we should be knowing law. And you said that ignorance is something which is not an excuse, and you cannot go ahead and say, I did not know that. It's actually that one should be knowing it. And that's why, in fact, as you said, that when you related it to spirituality, saying that we are in pain or we are in sorrow because we do not know our true self. Our actual knowledge is hidden, it is veiled with ignorance, and so therefore there is sorrow or there is pain. Such a lovely connection with ignorance, law, and the phenomena of science. Sir, you've been always highlighting that the most important skill in the fourth industrial age is the skill of learning, and children to become self-directed, lifelong learners. So, sir, what should the educationists be doing so that they can enhance this skill in the students?
Yeah, so actually it is very interesting. All children are learners.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at small children, in fact, I will share with you a story. So once upon a time when I was in my 50s, I was with a bunch of medical doctors from AIMS and some committee, etc. And conversation tended towards this question that why is it that as we grow older, our ability to learn something new becomes less? I was assuming it to be axiomatic. And I said, children can learn so much in such a short time and we take so much longer. What is the reason? And I was hoping that the doctor will give me a medical reason that your nervous system has this or your nerves can't do this. So, like they say with age, you have diabetes because your insulin mechanism reduces, etc. But they said, no, nothing of the sort. At any age, you are perfectly capable of learning. There's a thing called neuroplasticity. There's nothing with it is our habits.
Yeah.
He said, have you observed a small child? A small child is spending all the waking hours learning.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And young mothers have a problem trying to put them to sleep or etc. Because until he's physically exhausted, he won't sleep just because it is time. And the moment he wakes up, he or she wakes up in the morning, he's asking questions or mimicking things or trying something. Right? All the methods, the cognitive, affective, psychomotor, everything is doing.
Yeah.
Right? What happens is as we grow up, we start working, studying from, let's say, morning breakfast to lunch. In lunch, we look for tea break. In tea break, we look for another tea break. No child looks for a break in between his process of learning. And this is the main difference. And all that we have to do is to allow that to continue. We should allow a child to be curious, allow the child to ask as many questions, raise as many questions, challenge things. The problem is that we don't want to do that. The second thing is, most children will try to figure out answers themselves. In fact, there's a very nice video by Alison Gopnik, which talks about how babies learn. And she says that it clearly shows that babies are like research people. They have a hypothesis, they do something, then they find the hypothesis doesn't work, they change their hypothesis, do something else, and so on till their hypothesis and observation match. He says babies are the R&D of humanity. Grown-ups are the marketing and sales. So the point is, all we have to do is to allow that and encourage that. The problem is that to establish our authority, we say, we will tell you what you should know.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, we will help you know what you want to know, which may sometimes be difficult and challenging, and therefore that is happening. So education was about establishing authority. Even today, it is about establishing authority. When you get your degree, what does the convocation say? By virtue of the authority vested in me as Vice Chancellor of the university, I grant you this. It doesn't say you and I have worked together, we argued, we debated. Now you are worthy of standing on your own. We say authority of Vice Chancellor. And one letter from UGC removes the authority of the Vice Chancellor. So the whole point is, from authority, we should go to just rekindling, just let childhood prevail. In fact, there is a very interesting project at MIT. It is called Forever Kindergarten. So if you behave like a child, in terms of childlike simplicity and curiosity, that is what it needs.
Correct.
In fact, I can share with you a very interesting quotation from Isaac Newton. So Newton, as you know, was accomplished. He did so much wonderful. In fact, people wrote poems. The natures and nature's law lay hid in night. God said that Newton be and there was light. But when Newton was asked, what do you think of your life? He says, I do not know what I may appear to the world. But to myself, I am like a child on the seashore, looking now for a smoother pebble or a prettier shell, while the whole ocean of truth lay undiscovered before.
Yeah.
So learning is about discovering truth.
Correct.
And truth is so vast that it doesn't get done by one person or one lifetime or a few people. And that is the pursuit of being human. The pursuit of being human is try to understand how things happen, why things happen, what are the universal laws. See, these laws, IPC, CRPC, etc., are created by humans. They are binding to a territorial jurisdiction. But nature's law are not binding to a territorial jurisdiction. Now with coronavirus, everybody knows that. You cannot say, no, you will not come beyond this border. You can prevent the people not going across border. But you cannot prevent the nature's law from not happening.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what you said is that basically inside our classrooms in the school, we should be letting curiosity be there in the students. They should be asking
you
questions.
see, the problem is that
it's there already.
Who controls the classroom?
Yes.
See, what I'm saying is it is the authority. See, the authority wants you to almost be indoctrinated in what their values are. There's a very interesting example of this. I don't know, you were of course very young, but when we were at school level, the atlas would always show Egypt, etc. as Middle East. We, as grown up also, we call them Middle East. And then only recently when we started applying our minds, we said it is not Middle East for us, it is West Asia for us. It was Middle East for the British. But even if you ask me today, I will call it Middle East because that's how I was groomed. So the purpose of education is to put in the authority. See, for us it is West Asia. It is no longer Middle East. But you talk to anybody who's had part of his education earlier, he will say Middle East, Middle East, Middle East. It's not Middle East, it's Middle East from their perspective.
Correct.
The rulers. So education, if it is allowed to, see, this is a big debate, and in fact I'm very serious about it. Who controls education? It is the rulers who control education, whereas it should be the educators who should control education.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, the educators have succumbed to the rulers to allow that. Anyway, continue.
So, yes, sir. Actually, this is what everybody else has also pointed out. I mean, I've had educationists here, and they have also said that there should be a large amount of autonomy which needs to be given to the school so that they are able to decide.
But how will the ruler give autonomy? See, the point is that if the ruler driven, he who pays the piper calls the tune. So the point is, right from, in fact, if you know history, the original idea was the divine right of kings, and the king can do no wrong. So king decides the law, king decides everything, king can do no wrong. It was only about 800 years ago that in England, the Magna Carta came, where they said even the king is limited in what he can do. Now we have come to constitutional law, where we say it's the constitution which binds us. But who writes the constitution? The people in power, the people in the constitution. So the problem has been that somehow we have gone into the idea that education is a responsibility of the state, and therefore it will be colored by what the state thinks. Whereas if education were not a state thing, then it would be very different. In fact, so that is the point. So there is no point in people saying we want autonomy, because you cannot have autonomy unless you are autonomous, which means you should be free. And the answer to that is, and I have been saying this, that people should become independent educators. So unless you are independent, see, look at the Indian freedom movement. Why was it led by lawyers? Because government employees couldn't have revolted against the government. Other employees could not have revolted against the zamindars. It was only lawyers who were not government employees who understood the law, and some of them were educated in England to understand what freedom means, and therefore they could think of a new order.
Correct.
So the problem is that as long as your employees governed by the FR and SR, etc. of the state, it will be very difficult for you to want autonomy and to anybody to give, because if you are paying, then you want your wish to be implemented. Anyway, continue.
Right, sir. Sir, because we are talking about curriculum, you've often quoted Professor CNR Rao saying that 90% of our universities and higher education institutions, they have got an outdated curriculum. And you've also said that by 2035, these schools and the colleges and the universities will not look like what they look like now. They will become rather redundant. So I just want to ask you that what do you think the universities are going to look like 10 years from now, or any education institution would look like?
So, see, firstly, both the quotation that I do is not my opinion. I am quoting important people. Professor CNR Rao was my senior colleague when I used to teach in IIT Kanpur. Then he got the Bharat Ratna. He's the only scientist with the Bharat Ratna. And so, and I quote him to say that he said this not in informal coffee or in an interview with Rupam Saha. He said this in the president's house. And president is the visitor of all central universities. And he said this almost 10 years ago. Nobody has reacted to it. Nobody said not 90%, it is only 80%, because probably it is 99%. Nobody has said we should take our Bharat Ratna away from CNR Rao because he is making a bad name for our universities. No, because they agree that this is right. UGC itself agrees that most of its universities are no good. The other thing that I've said is actually a report from the Department of Science and Technology. It was published in 2014, India 2035, and has the signature of Narendra Modi in its foreword. And I tell this to educationists, you have no idea, he has already said by 2035 you are not required. He has signed it in that paper. So one night he will tell you that this is all over. So anyway, on a more pragmatic note, we have already seen, because of this corona thing, that everything that institutions stood for is already gone for a toss. Compulsory attendance, gone for a toss. Academic examination, gone for a toss. Lectures, gone for a toss. And the thing they criticize, distance learning, e-learning, is coming up center stage. So what we expect, and I think this is the way I now expect, I'm giving my opinion. The first thing that we see, and you would have already experienced this during the last month or so, that actually we are talking teaching. Whether it is at primary stage, middle stage, secondary stage, senior secondary stage, higher education, lifelong learning, it's like a doctor is a doctor. Whether he's a pediatrician or a geriatrician or a diabetic specialist or endocrinologist, he's first a doctor. And therefore, distinguishing between primary, secondary, etc. is meaningless. We're talking education throughout. So we're talking about continuum of learning. Not by date of birth, age on certain birth, the date put in compartment, that is out of question. The second thing is, therefore, these institutions need not be separate structures. So like the hospital, which is for healthcare, we're talking of cognitive development program of the nation, with people at different stages and different needs for cognitive development. And there is no point in grouping them in 40 or 20 or 100, because today you are saying even 40 won't work, there should be only 10 in a class or 15 in a class. So what we are saying is, with establishment of IT, communication, and especially with artificial intelligence leading to personalization, you will have a continuum of education. Now, for people to meet, you can have co-learning spaces. So just like we have seen the emergence of co-working space, where there can be a one-person company, a bigger company, whatever, instead of segregation of school, college, and university, you will have neighborhood co-learning spaces. So everybody who is interested in learning goes there. Like you have a neighborhood temple, neighborhood health center, neighborhood this thing, neighborhood milk booth, you have a neighborhood co-learning space, where all the physical parts that you want for people to meet each other is there, and people will learn through a central model which is available, which even Indian government is trying to do. They've created SOAM, they're going to create other things. So information will be disseminated through an electronic system. Even today, it happens so often that 6 of us are meeting and everyone is looking at their mobile phone and also talking to others. Right? So that will be the model of learning. You will talk to other humans with respect to whatever you want, but can still be on your mobile or laptop or whatever for your educational purposes and assessment. This to me is likely to become the future, because you create a good infrastructure. Now we are talking of 5G everywhere. We are talking of even 4G broadband being available in a number of villages. The other day he said that there are 300,000 community service centers in this country already. They can all become community learning centers. So in so even when you need a bit of social distancing, etc., you can just go to your neighborhood complex and do that. Why should you go further?
Yeah.
And this whole idea that I need 22 acres for a university looks so stupid today. You need a good professor and willing to learn how does 22 acres matter, or for that matter 8 acres for a school, 2 acres. So all the regulators appear to be so stupid because everything they set for is not happening today. Right? And they are encouraging that. So they are not saying that close means really close, we will see after everything is over. No. As you know, teachers are doing hard work to get into online teaching, to continue teaching. We're talking online assessment, we're talking about this. So there is a clear acknowledgement of the old model. Earlier it was failing on pedagogical grounds, now it is failing on operational grounds. You simply can't do that. See, the buses cannot carry people in those numbers, you will have to leave every alternative seat. The classroom cannot do that because you will have to leave every alternative thing, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Okay, so sir, if I've understood you correctly, what you're saying is that we would be having some co-learning spaces which are in the neighborhood, and people will go over there, and there will be a lot of dissemination of information.
And you will have a good social interaction. You see, one of the problems that traditional school has is you are only with children of your age group for the 12 years you are in school.
Correct.
Earlier at home, people had people of different ages. You had somebody bigger to you, somebody smaller to you.
Right.
In fact, you should at least, in US, the very popular concept called one-room schoolhouse. And the idea was because the population was sparsely populated, sparsely dispersed, in a given village, you would have somebody of class 6, somebody of class 5, somebody of class 4, they will all go to the same place. US presidents have come out of such a thing.
Okay.
And you being in education should read a book by Salman Khan called One World Schoolhouse.
Okay.
Now that One World Schoolhouse has emanated from this idea that in the US it used to be one-room schoolhouse, where all children of learning age. Now with lifelong learning, we can even have grown-ups over there.
Yeah, yeah.
And therefore, we are talking of a learner community. We are not talking of segregation by age, but we are saying all these people have a disposition of learning. The grown-ups can also contribute, the young can also contribute. The grown-ups will bring their experience and knowledge, the young will bring their enthusiasm and creativity and innovation, and that's the way to move on.
All right. Great, sir. I think it's a huge shift and a change which India might witness if it so happens that we have co-learning spaces.
And quite doable.
You've been talking quite a lot, and we know that now we are in that age where there is artificial intelligence and virtual reality, the augmented reality, big data, machine learning, and all of these things. So how do you think, sir, that we need to increase the teacher competence? How should we increase the teacher competence so that they are able to make the best use of this technology and make our children more future ready?
Yeah, so actually it is very simple. I think one of the very important things, and I said this sometimes, it dawned upon me one day. So let me begin with the story. So when I was at school, and in school physics, you are taught something called simple machines, which is the inclined plane, the lever, the pulley, and you talk about lever of first kind, second kind, etc.
Yes, sir.
My elder brother was going to engineering college, and there he was studying theory of machines and machines that make machines. I was very impressed with the idea that he is going to learn about machines that make machines. But today I understand, like an automobile factory or any factory is a machine which makes machines. What I'm trying to say today is that teachers must acknowledge their learners first. And if they have forgotten that, let us rekindle that.
Yeah.
And teachers are learners who create other learners. Therefore, because when we talked about co-learning space, the idea was that everybody there is a learner.
Right.
Somebody knows more, somebody knows less, somebody knows more in a certain area, somebody knows less in another area. But they're all in the journey of learning. So the point is that once we agree with that, so therefore everything new that is there, why should a teacher not be excited about experiencing virtual reality?
Yeah.
I've got an Oculus Rift and I've kept it in my almirah because I think that is the way it will be in future, and so on and so forth. So why should they not explore? Why should they say that it is my role only to do this?
Yeah.
And one of the very important reasons which I tell people to do this is that except for misfortunes, the longevity has increased. And therefore, retirement will not happen at 60 or 55.
Right. Yeah.
So I have my senior colleagues who have drawn pension for more years than they drew salary.
Okay.
So after PhD abroad, they came and joined IIT Kanpur at the age of 40 as a professor, etc.
Yeah.
They retired at 60.
Right.
Today they are 85 and more.
Right.
So they've drawn pension for more years than they drew salary, and they are still wanted.
Yes.
So my senior colleagues are still teaching people quantum mechanics, etc. So there aren't enough teachers to teach them.
True.
So the point is that learning is a very important thing. It's a lifelong activity, and there is no point in planning for a life of 55 years or 60 years or something. I mean, either you are unfortunate, it will be cut short at time that you have no control over.
Correct.
If you look at traditional aging, most of the people will live well beyond 80s, well beyond 80s into the 90s. Well, look at Ram Jethmalani, is still going strong, and so on. And there are many others. I was at a conference recently, academic conference. There was amongst us a person who was 99 years old. And he got up and he was arguing like any academic. It was impossible to keep him quiet. No crutches, no this thing, no microphone needed. His voice was as loud as everything, and so on. So it is very important for people to see that if they want a long journey of happiness, it is perpetual learning which will provide that.
Correct. Correct. So here also, sir, you're saying that teachers also have to let themselves explore. They have to open themselves to a lot of learning and then take on learning, because as you said, longevity has increased. So therefore, every teacher has to keep on learning, keep updating, and then see that.
And it's an enjoyable thing, because if I feel this, for example, now that the virus come, I learned everything about Baltimore classification of viruses, what are the 7 kinds of viruses. Therefore, all teachers, as I said, are first learners, and anything that they come across, back to my original thing, ignorance is no excuse.
Yes.
And therefore, it is important for you to be well informed and aware. Like Mahatma Gandhi said, ahimsa is if you can be violent and choose to be non-violent. So you are knowledgeable and still choose to be modest about your knowledge is a good thing.
Correct. Correct. Right, sir. Sir, we've talked about schools and university, education, teachers, everything. So what is your advice to the parents? What is that which they should do so that they can prepare their children for this increasingly changing world?
Yeah, so first thing is, and I really like somewhere, I don't know where I read, but Kahil Gibran has a very nice quote where he says, your children are born to you, but they don't belong to you. I think this is very important. Most of us start thinking of children as possessions. Earlier, we used to think of women as possessions, and we used to have harems and so on and so forth, which are inevitable. Now we see children as possessions. And we see the children as possessions to be showed off. So we will put them on a, polish them, this thing, put them on a showcase, and what to showcase are children. This is what is important to understand, that it is a part of the continuum. It is a part of life's evolution. Your grandparents, parents, you and your children and grandchildren and whatever is a story of it. It is not, in a sense, your ownership. It is very important to appreciate. And the world that your children live in and will live in is very different from the world you lived in or your parents lived in. And therefore, you should be ready to accept that and prepare them for that. There's another thing which I think you'd be a little amazed to hear that.
Yeah.
If you are a young mother, you have to prepare your child for the 22nd century. 21st century is over. A child who is born in 2020s, if he lives to be 90, he will be in the 22nd century.
True. Yes.
Right. So it's very different from what you might have seen or heard or learned from.
You can imagine. Yeah.
No, but this is truth. We're in 2020. Children born today will see the 22nd century.
Absolutely.
Most of them. Some of them may not, but most of them will see the 22nd century. So when people talk to me about 21st century education, I said, why are you forgetting this? Which is where they will spend their last years.
Right.
That is the most important. This they will go through. But how do you spend the last few years of your life?
Right.
Education should prepare you for that.
Right.
So this is thing which is very important. And the other thing that is, in my view, very important is that if you look at the coronavirus story, the essential weapon against coronavirus is your immunity. Rest is all make-believe.
Yeah.
Right? Those who have a strong immunity are able to resist it.
Right.
Now, this is very important. So the point is, your education should develop immunity against future shocks. Right? The purpose of education is to develop immunity against future shocks. Right? And this is what is important. So go back to my original story about ignorance. So from ignorance to knowledge, we are talking of an immune system against future changes.
Correct.
If you don't have that, you will either perish like the dinosaur or the dodo, or even if you look at that, king of the jungle is a protected species now. He was king of the jungle.
Yeah.
But he was not king of the urban, the metro, the IT age, the fourth industrial age. There he's become a protected species because some humans have shown compassion. And therefore, the whole idea is, and one can put it back to the word that we are saying. First, create interest, curiosity, desire to learn, and then learn well. Not to pass exam or score marks, so that when I know that I know.
Correct.
That is the thing. I should not say I have a piece of paper to show that I know.
Right.
I should know that I know and be able to do that. So this is exactly the thing. So like you're saying, don't prepare them for a sprint. CBSE, IIT, JEE or NEET or whatever. Prepare them for the marathon. Prepare them for make them long distance runners.
Right.
And a long distance runner is a very different thing from a short sprint thing.
Correct.
And the learning for immediate goals should give way to this thing. One of the challenges that happens, and many people ask me, you're saying all these big things for future ready, etc., but what about tomorrow? Future will come 80 years later, but the next 10 years, what do I do? And I have tried to say that you can respond to this on the basis of what is known as the Pareto principle. The Pareto principle of 80-20 applies in various places. That you apply it to your own pursuit. 80% of your energy, resources, etc., you spend on the conventional part, what is the established part for today. But 20% you spend on future readiness, on building your immune system, on keeping yourself future-proof, and so on and so forth. And this will continue to be throughout. So this can go for the next 10 years. The next 10 years, you know again what is certain and what is future, and so on. So this can be a universal principle that you could use in life.
Absolutely, sir. It's a workable formula wherein 80% for conformity, 20% build up your immune system, create your learning skills, develop curiosity, learn for the sake of learning.
And now, for example, in the last 2 months, they have demonstrated you can do this through electronic means.
Right.
So no quarrel with school. So we do the school part, but I spend only 80% of my effort budget on the school part. 20% of my effort budget on the electronic part, which I do separately from the rest of the world.
Correct, correct. So thank you so much. It was a lovely advice for the parents. So coming on to something which is really personal, and I would like to take you back to your school days. I know that you received, you had written a letter to Sir Richard Feynman when he received the Nobel Prize, and you also got a reply back from him with a personal note. So, sir, as a student receiving a reply from a Nobel laureate, so what were your first reactions to that?
Yeah, so this is what I meant by youth. See, youth does not care about that. So at that time, I was at the university level, but still about, the year is 1965 or so, so I'm about 18 years. So you don't care that, oh, Richard Feynman hai tum kaun ho, whatever. So I wrote him a letter congratulating him. And he sent me back a letter acknowledging, etc. And at that time, pen friends used to be a very common phrase. So I called him my pen teacher. And he acknowledged. What is more interesting is that it happened in 65 and gone. Some time back, a nephew of mine found this book where he was traveling. This is book I've given you. This is called Perfectly Reasonable Thing from the Beaten Track.
Correct.
And in this book, He saw my letter and reply printed, and then he called me and said, "It must be you. Who else could it be in Allahabad who had done this?" And I was very pleased to see that it is over there, and I'm very happy because at some level, this is also a very good description of me. Perfectly reasonable deviation from the beaten track. I think this describes me also very well, that I have done the usual thing. So the point is that it also shows that when you're talking to really great people, they're perfectly happy to engage with you. So if you remember that co-learning space that I talked about, a very senior person may be there. So in my career, early on, I have interacted with Nobel laureates in flesh and blood, Abdul Salam, so many others, and so on. And that changes how you live and how you work. So I think instead of compartmentalizing into a specific students and one teacher for them, two teachers for them, if they meet a lot of people of different kind of things, including people who are working, people who are entrepreneurs. See, once you have this co-learning space, you'll find professionals wanting to come there and speak to children. And children saying, okay, this is what a lawyer looks like, this is what a doctor looks like, this is what happens, and so on. So it can be very interesting. So I have no hesitation in saying that I have been very much influenced by the people I have come into contact with, and both in terms of in person and through their books and so on and so forth as well. That's very, very inspirational.
Absolutely. So, sir, you've been very fortunate to be actually meeting so many Nobel laureates, talking to them, different scientists. You've visited so many different countries as well. But for our children who are there right now, and even for the educators, I know that you have got specific 55 words of inspiration or motivation. So if you could just tell those 55 words so that all of us, feel motivated.
So actually what happened, this occurred to me sometime, because people said that, the children's span of attention nowadays is very little. So, and we professors are accused of talking at length. And the whole idea is that children's attention is very limited. So I just one day thought to myself that if I had 10 words that I had to say to something, what would I say? If I had 9, what would I say? If I had 8, what would I say? And these are not my thing. These are quotations of well-known people.
Yes.
Now, it happens so, if you know arithmetic progression, 1 plus 2 plus 3 up to 10 is 10 into 11 upon 2, 55. So I called it 55 words of inspiration. I also created a PowerPoint on it, which I've shared with you. But the first thing, if I have 10 words to say, I will say, remember Vivekananda. He said, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. This is Swami Vivekananda. If you have 9 words to say, there is a famous thing from Rig Veda, Ano Bhadra Kritavo Yantu Vishwata, which in English means, let noble thoughts come to us from all directions.
Yes.
If I have 8 words to inspire, this is from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was one of the very successful presidents. And some people said, he is lucky. And he's responded by saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So I thought that is a very important one. For 7 words, this is something from Shakespeare's Hamlet, the very famous speech, Polonius, where Shakespeare says, neither a borrower nor a lender be. And all the financial crisis, etc., has largely happened because of this. Gandhiji said very beautifully in 6 words, you can imprison my body, but he says, no one can imprison my mind. You remember we were talking about education, etc. And that's why they say education is a liberating force. For 5 words, I have inspiration from Bhagavad Gita. So, I'm sorry, from Gautam Buddha. So when Gautam Buddha was on his deathbed, his most favorite people, Anand, asked him, so without you, how will we manage? And he said, be a lamp unto yourself. Apo Deepo Bhava, but be a lamp unto yourself. For 4 words, there's a famous quotation from Einstein, because while quantum mechanics was probabilistic, Einstein did not like the idea. And because Einstein was a theist believer in God, he said, God does not play dice. And that is the 4 words, God doesn't play dice. For 3 words, my inspiration is Rabindranath Tagore. And the 3 words are Akla Chalo Re. And he says, if nobody hears your thing, then Akla Chalo Re. And this is very important, especially when you are in a path of something new. I mean, whether it was Copernicus on his own thing, or Darwin, or whatever, they had to go on their own path because the rest of the world was not agreeing with them. And therefore, to me, Akla Chalo Re is a very, very inspirational 3-word thing. If there are only 2 words, then my phrase is just shine. And just shine is the philosophy of the sun. The sun doesn't care what happens, it just burns itself out. Typically fusion of helium, but it burns itself out to shine. That's all. Therefore, if there are two words for inspiration, that's all. If there is just one word, I have to say, what would I say? And the answer is excel. It is not Surf Excel, it is not Microsoft Excel, it is pursuit of excellence. And I was very pleased with this, and therefore I created a PowerPoint slide also. I've said this very often in my talks, that these 55 words can be almost a philosophy in a nutshell.
Absolutely, sir. So you've covered all the different aspects in this 55 words, everything, all aspects of life as well. So there are such beautiful collections, and I'm sure everybody who's seeing this program would be benefited by this. So my last question to you is that what keeps you going?
See, I think it is the same thing that I said very early. I am still very curious. I need to know, and fortunately for me, I know enough to be interested in learning more. Sometimes if you don't know enough, you are not wanting to learn more because you don't have the background for it.
Correct.
Now, because I know some physics, I know some maths, I know some biology, I know some philosophy, I know something about religions. Whenever something new comes, I am exactly at that point where I know part of it and I don't know the rest.
Correct.
And therefore, I am very, very curious. So I will share with you today, for example, nowadays I am comparing the effect of the virus and the effect of the nuclear bombs. You know, the nuclear bomb had enriched uranium so many kilos, the bomb itself was 1,000 kilos and so on. The entire coronavirus in the world today is less than 1 gram.
Yes.
I was telling somebody, tomorrow's chief of defense staff will not be a weapons expert, will be a virologist. So this is exactly what I said is what keeps me going and interested. It is intrinsic nature, also the conditions I've developed, because very true, if I could not understand what are mathematical equations, if I could not understand what is DNA, RNA, etc., I would not follow all this.
Right.
But because I have that understanding, because this coronavirus has this kind of an RNA, then it has a lipid layer or whatever, protein, etc. Proteins are made of amino acids have NH2 in them, etc. So I think it is because of that background, and as you saw from science and arts and law and philosophy, it makes life very interesting for me. So every new thing is something which I like to know of and so on. Some people's background may not be enough, then may not be able to, for every them, so if you really don't know the background. So I am fortunate enough to know things at that level where I am curious to understand what I don't really know.
Right, sir. So it's the knowledge which is actually propelling you to take more knowledge. All right.
This is what is a very important aspect. People forget that. That's why when you want to make learners, you have to create in them that much body of knowledge for them to be able to create more knowledge, absorb more knowledge, etc.
Absolutely. Sir, it's actually absolutely thrilling talking to you. It's so knowledgeable. In fact, the whole conversation, and I think that people have to see it twice or thrice to get the complete value out of this talk. You've talked about some of the very revolutionary ideas into education, and I believe that this will get into reality after some time. Yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for giving your time. It was absolutely lovely talking to you, sir.
Thank you. All the best for all your efforts.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard Professor M M Pant talk about what is his vision of education. How is it that he sees education transforming in next 10 years? What are the skill sets which will be needed by the students, by teachers, by parents, and how is the university education going to change? You also heard about the motivating words which he had to say to everybody. I hope you have taken back some good, very important points which you would like to emulate and use it in your own personal professional life. Thank you so much and keep watching Leadership Talks.